Hey everyone, it's Corbin here, and before we get into today's podcast, I just want to let you guys know that we are talking about some very deep and mature subject matter, and there is a little bit of language, so if you are sensitive to this or fairly young, we suggest that you maybe skip out on this or check in later, but we do appreciate it, and hope you guys enjoy this and get something out of it. Thanks. Welcome back to episode 28 of Chats. I'm Corbin.
I'm Sarah.
And today, Mom has brought up this topic.
We want to talk about being an ally with everything that's going on in the world, and I think you'd pretty much have to be under a rock not to know what is going on, primarily in the U.S., but it's a global issue, and that is the pandemic of racism. We've been focused on COVID-19 for so long, and that has certainly been a priority. It still is very important, but it's also something that we need to talk about and has seemed to have come to a head. Now, we are recording this, I'm just looking at my watch here, on June 3rd. We're a little late because, and that's on me, I've been kind of pushing it back a little bit. This story out of the U.S. has been developing literally
for over a week.
And every day.
Yeah.
Every day it's been changing. So when I first went to Corbin with this idea and said, hey, I think we should talk about this. And we both had some pretty strong feelings about whether or not to do this or how we wanted to do it. And I think that for me, that made it even more important to do it.
And we've been talking about it all week.
Yes.
As we said, we started the podcast because we talk so much to each other about stuff. And this is one of those topics where we've been talking about it because it's important to discuss right now, to bring up these uncomfortable subjects.
And normally we focus on the positivity, and I think we kind of said that right from, episode 1, that, we want to be a neutral place. We don't get heavy into politics. We don't get heavy into, things that can cause you stress or angst. We try to give you tools for those things. But I think right now, if we've learned nothing else from the past 8 days, since May 25th, it is that we as white people, and we've commented on that in the past, that we are both white, we have a privilege and an ability and now with this, a platform to speak up and say some things that maybe need to be said. And just to give some context again, this is in reference to 2 events that took place on May 25th. And I know some people will say that the George Floyd incident where he was murdered at the hands of, 1, but technically 4 police officers in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that took place. But there was also an occurrence earlier in that day. And that actually started the ball rolling for me, that I actually felt very upset by this. Of course, remembering that we were not yet aware of what was about to happen or was just happening, was the incident in Central Park with a black man who was enjoying the park and was actually a bird watcher. Yeah, his name was Christian Cooper. And he came upon a woman who was white. And again, we have to make these distinctions because this is the topic of being an ally and racism right now. And the white woman would not put, or had her dog off leash, which Dog Ownership 101, you don't take your dog off leash in an area that's not off leash permitted.
It's illegal to do in that park.
Absolutely.
And that's why he brought it up.
Yes, he was pointing out to her. And also the dog would be disruptive to what he was trying to do, which would be enjoying the birds in the park. It didn't go well. And there's footage. You can Google this and look it up. It's actually, from his perspective, he's shooting this where he's saying to her, please, just handle your dog. And she's refusing. And she's coming at him like he's done something wrong. She then gets out her cell phone and calls 911 asking for police because she's being threatened by an armed black man. Which, as soon as I heard that, even as I say that right now, my chest tightens. Because as a white woman, and this is where I'm completely wrong, I've always seen these types of things perpetrated between a white man and a black man. But there's a whole part of the picture that I was not aware of, which is the weaponization of white females.
it's very reminiscent of To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a book everyone should be reading right now.
Yes.
Where I forget the lady's name, but the court case in that book is around a white girl who is practically framing a black man for something he didn't do.
Yes.
So, and that's what reminded me of. That's what this park scenario reminded me of, and it bothers me. It really does, because I've grown up with not only African American friends, but also Oriental friends, East Indian friends from different cultures, creeds, religions, all that. Mm-hmm. And I saw a very interesting clip where it said, it was a white guy, and he was saying, for however many years I've been alive, I haven't been racist. And I thought that was enough. Mm-hmm. Now, for the first time, I'm realizing you have to be anti-racist.
I think that's a big thing. But before we get too far down that road...
So, and that's what I'm getting at, is that, like, when you talk about your chest nodding up, it's mine has been like that.
Yeah. And maybe this will make you feel better, too, is taking this time and saying something. But, yeah, so for me, the fact was that, here she was taking a role, knowing what she was doing, and living in a country where calling the police, as they would find out hours later, can absolutely end up being a fatal decision for a black person. This isn't a whimsical decision. This was extremely high stakes, what she was doing. The only reason that video came out was because the black man sent it to his sister. And she was horrified because she knew that that's what would happen to him if had he not had his cell phone.
It blew up after
right.
that.
And that's why she was so upset as a woman, saying to another woman, like, you don't even understand the power you have because of the systemic racism that's built into the fabric of this country. So that's what kind of got my antenna up. Then hours later, we find out about what happened in Minneapolis. And again, this is a black man who was in a store, a restaurant, I believe, or a convenience store. And he was, the suggestion is, because we don't know the facts, is that he was in possession of a counterfeit bill, $20 bill. First of all, people have counterfeit money all the time and may not even realize they have counterfeit money. So let's not even make that an issue.
It's debatable that if he knew it was counterfeit or not.
Yeah, whether he's trying to pass it or he just had it is different. So anyway, the police were called. A second cruiser was called in. George Floyd was a larger man, so I guess the argument would be it would take more officers to subdue someone who was, quote unquote, resisting arrest, which again has not been what the video has shown. That's not the case at all.
Not been proven.
So when you, and I made a point of watching the video, and there's people that said don't watch the video, it's very upsetting. I watched that video because I was already pissed off. Sorry, language alert. There will be language in this episode. I was already pissed off from the first video I saw earlier in the day. And then to find out that this was happening the same day and that literally the man was dying on film. And when people say, why does everyone carry their cell phone with them? If I were black, I would literally have it going on. I would have it as freaking body camera time because you need to have everything documented.
Speaking of body cameras, a lot of the cops down in the States have been turning theirs off apparently. And
wow.
that's wrong.
Yeah, that's a whole disciplinary thing.
Yeah.
So moving forward, as Corbin has said, in our house, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of your gender or gender identity or
anything,
sexual preference, nobody is better than anybody. But exactly what you said, it's not enough. And I didn't realize how not enough it was until I started seeing that there were things that I was doing, and I'm throwing myself on the skewer here. I would say things like, I don't see color. I was very proud of that. which is very convenient as a white person not to see color, except I didn't understand the consequences for a black person interacting with a white person who only saw color.
Yeah.
I thought if I could just be positive and neutral enough, it was okay. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that's not fixing the problem for a black person who is being targeted by a white person because of their color. And that's when the penny dropped for me. It's like, it's not good enough to just sit here and say, this is how I feel. And because I feel this way, if we could all just feel this way, it would be okay. That's completely unicorn thinking. It's not going to happen that way. So you have to take it a step farther and say, not only, it's like, no, I see color and I need to do some work.
And I acknowledge the difference.
Yes. Because as much as it doesn't matter to me if someone looks different, that isn't an impact for me. Mm-hmm. That's not their reality. Yeah. Their reality is that their color is impactful, and it does skew the world they live in as opposed to the world I live in.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've, like, even I think in my subconscious, my hamster is running on that all the time right now. And I think that's kind of like you're feeling tired with that understanding too.
I can't wrap my head around the hate you must have, the amount of hate you must have to be racist, because like it must drain, like to a normal person that would be draining to have that much hate. Like I hate it if I have a disagreement with someone, like I'll come back in a day and try and make amends, you know. I cannot imagine. And I was watching a YouTuber who I watch frequently, and they're black, and they did a live stream where they just aired their thoughts out, and it's very well done. And one of the things he said is like you have to realize black people in America are getting, and around the world sometimes, are being treated worse than like animals. Like you have never seen a person kneel on their dog's or animal's throat.
Well, those people are charged with cruelty.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point, was that what we're hearing from black people is there's no accountability when it comes to police brutality. And let's remember, police brutality is but one part of the racism issue, right? That's one piece of the puzzle. There are so many other things as far as, like I say, systemic racism, and I've been trying to absorb as much information on that as I can, is when you literally, all the cards are stacked against you. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you have the wrong sounding name, you may not get called for a job. No. You may not get you will not get the same opportunities to loan money so you can buy a house in a nice, again, finger quotes, nice neighborhood like the white people do, because it's been set up that you as a black person are not someone to invest in. Yeah. So when you look at the big picture and you say, like, how do you fix this? What we're seeing with the protests, the rioting, the outrage right now, which, again, completely justified. You've got supporters in this house, I can tell you that for sure. That is one part of it. That has to get fixed, and that's going to hopefully be a domino effect. I just can't imagine being someone who's waited 400 years, 300 years, 200 years. Like, because before black people had this, we were doing it to Aboriginal communities. Yeah. So, you know.
And we're still doing it in Canada primarily. But so after the George Floyd incident and tragedy, a bunch of protests rung out. Mm-hmm. And I think we talked about this, but we think the two things that have really fueled, the three things that have fueled the fire for this to take center stage deservingly, all these protests and such, was one, a week earlier, there were protests from, say, right-winged people who were
extremists,
were protesting about their freedom of
Sorry, you're talking about COVID.
Yeah, they were
I thought
protesting
somewhere
about
else.
COVID and how they didn't want to wear masks and they wanted to be let out.
They wanted the economy opened up
Yeah.
so they could go to their pubs and get their hair cut. And
it was very well documented of a bunch of white people screaming and yelling with guns
in public, like in government
in
buildings.
government buildings, and like closer than you and I in this small closet, screaming at the top of their lungs in their faces, and the cops are doing nothing. And now we see protests now that are completely peaceful, and cops just going crazy and shooting tear gas, rubber bullets, almost jumping the gun.
Yeah.
They are jumping the gun. So that's one thing I think that really was timing wise helping this movement grow.
Because it's such an extreme.
Yes. Yeah.
You didn't see black people screaming at police officers
No.
in public buildings. It was only white people
With guns.
that could get away with that.
The other thing is obviously COVID-19 as a whole. We don't have sports. We don't have movies. We don't have other things to distract us. This is the issue. Whether you're listening to a radio station that plays music or watching TV or on social media, literally it's everywhere. You cannot escape this, and that's what I feel the world needs right now, where it needs to be put accountable. Everyone, there's no reason for someone not to know what's going on. As you said, you have to be living under a rock, and even then, that would have to be a big rock. And then lastly, the reason which I know Mom's going to want to talk about is the President of the United States is the last reason of why this protest has grown and this movement has grown, is because usually during this time, the President of the United States would put out an address and try and make plans to calm things down and
Bring the country together.
bring the people together. And this president has gone out of his way to add fuel to the fire, and it's been disgusting to see. Like we're not Trump fans in this house, and I don't care who knows that, because that's a fact. And especially right now with what he's doing, we are like
It's okay. 54% of people in the U.S. aren't Trump people either, so it doesn't matter.
But you don't think it can get worse, and then it just does with him, and it's an abomination what he's doing right now. So you probably have some points on the protests, obviously, but maybe Trump or something like that. But
for me, there's been lots of big things with Trump, but the most recent thing is when people are trying to pass the buck as to who gave the order. It doesn't matter who gave the order. The concept was directed from Trump that he would have a photo op,
which he didn't tell anyone about.
which he didn't run past anyone with any kind of prep or clearance or even notify the media, and then had force used against peaceful protesters so that he could cross the street to go to the church across from the White House and have a photo op with an upside down Bible, because that church has sustained damage. And even the representatives from the church said there was not a significant amount of damage. There was spray paint that can be cleaned up. There's some windows broken, a small fire in the back that can be fixed. Structurally completely sound. The irony is when he went to that church during the inauguration, he drove a car. He was in a limo to go to that church, but not this day.
No.
And I think he's trying to do damage control, because he went for the bunker the days before, that in which he's now saying he had to inspect the bunker, which is a bunch of bunk.
Yeah.
It's being handled horrifically bad. Like exactly what you say. Like literally the first thing, it used to be when I wake up in the morning and be like, what's the new COVID count? And not to think that we're not taking that seriously. We absolutely are. It is still very much present in our minds.
And I hope that it doesn't come back in 2 weeks to all these protesters, because that would be
I think
sickening.
of that too. I think of how close they are together, and most of them are being really responsible and trying to wear a face covering. But you can't help but notice that with people being in such close proximity, that there's going to be, at some point, there's going to be some kind of concern for that.
Spike. Yeah. Especially in the States right now.
But, for me, look, as a mother, the the social media that's really struck me, or the information coming through. And we don't just listen to one media source, so don't think we're mainlining CNN or anything like that. We are absolutely checking with various sources, and whether it's Canadian and American. If I've taught my children anything, it's to always always go to more than one source. Yeah. But from that, like it's the stories of parents who have to have talks with their children at a tender age, like 5, 6 years old, and explain to them that if they come in contact with a police officer, that there are certain things that they must do and certain things they must not do. And none of those things would be anything I would have to tell you or your brother. No. That, like, it again, there's that kind of in the bottom of my throat and the top of my chest where I sit there and I think, the stats right now are that 1 in 3 black male youth will end up in jail. Yeah. That is an incredible number. When you start doing the math and you're going 1, 2, 3, you, 1, 2, 3, you.
That's like, not that, and that's only jail. That's not dead.
Oh yeah, that's just incarceration. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Now, for full disclosure here, I don't want to talk too much about what I do for a living. That's kind of something separate and apart from the podcast. But I do have a number of friends that are police officers, and or people that work in the law enforcement world. And I can tell you that there are some police officers here in Canada that aren't awesome, but the majority are. There are a lot of good people out there that wear a uniform and risk their life, especially right now. And it's heartbreaking to think that those people are looking at these situations and thinking society is painting them all with that brush, because it just takes one, and it's going to tarnish the reputations of everyone. And what I find redemptive in that is seeing the various services throughout, like Canada and the US and around the world, those law enforcement agencies that are engaging with the public and supporting them in this. And whether it's taking a knee, or in Michigan where the sheriff, steps right up and says, yeah, we're not going to make this a protest, we're going to make this a parade, and we will go with you. Yeah. Like, that's leadership, and that's compassion, and that's being an ally. Yeah. Going back full circle to what we want to talk about. How do we become an ally?
And hold on, before that, not disagreeing with you, but putting a mirror up to what you just said. Mm-hmm. Same thing goes with the protesters and looters.
Oh,
there
absolutely.
Are people right now who are protesting and doing amazing work, and they are the movement.
And they're putting that message out in a way that's being heard that has never been heard before. Yeah,
and they're risking their lives, and some of them their careers and such. And there are other people who, some of which, I agree with some of the rioting, because I saw a good analogy of a lady who lost her sister. And she was it's the stages of grief and the anger stage. She was throwing herself against the wall for like 15 minutes straight. Yeah. And she's going at
just
it.
The pain.
And the husband didn't know why, because she's doing more damage to herself. But he then realized after a while that she needed that time to get it out, just to get it out.
Release.
And so I get the rioting, because there's been so long where they haven't been heard for the movement, where they have done marches, where they have done the Martin Luther King Jr. approach, and they've been doing it forever, and they haven't listened. So it's almost like this is the only way. It's the people who are taking advantage, and there's so many photos and videos that make me sick of white people, and sometimes not white people, either using it for publicity, people taking photos for Instagram or social media, probably.
People who are damaging things. Like, who takes a sledgehammer to a protest?
Yeah, people who taking weapons and such to protest, or quote unquote protest. This is when the rioting is happening. People stealing from stores, But it's hard, because it's half and half with me, because I do agree with what I just said at the start. But on the other hand, the other people who are taking advantage of it, it's sickening, especially when you see some celebrities.
That's low.
Some of the celebrities you see, it's like, what are you doing? Why are you benefiting from this? You're not. So, going back on to what you said, I just wanted to get that out there about everything has two sides. Everything has...
Yeah. It's not that clear cut.
No. And so the police, I agree. Not all police are bad, but same with the rioters. They keep calling them rioters and stuff like that. They're not. They're protesters.
Yeah.
And most of them are doing peaceful. Most of them are doing peaceful protests.
The majority.
It's very frustrating.
Well, and tying back into Martin Luther King Jr., like for me, looking at that, I've seen so many posts where people say, this is protesting, and he protested and saved the world, changed the world. Sorry, not this. And of course, it's a picture of someone looting, and it's like, I'm not taking away from the sentiment, but I think you need to really read what that means. Martin Luther King started a movement. He didn't change the world, because the world is still struggling with the same shit that was happening when he was alive. Yeah. So we can't say that he changed the world. He got the ball rolling, and he started the glimmer of hope that it was possible, which I think has sustained people in the black community all this time. And white people hold him up as, yes, I agree with him, but it's not enough to agree with him. Mm-hmm. And as far as protesting or causing damage, I can tell you right now that if something happened to you or your brother or your dad, like what happened to George Floyd, I'd be frickin' flipping tables. You can't tell me that there would be an appropriate, again, I'm doing finger quotes. This is like all finger quotes. There's no appropriate way to react to something like this. And that's not to say that I'm advocating damage and I think it's okay to do this stuff. It's not okay. But there's a bigger not okay here. You know what's also not okay? People getting killed because they didn't happen to come out vanilla. Yeah. That's what's not okay. So let's measure our outrage and what we're talking about. And a very good point that was made that I read earlier today was, we need to stop saying that's really too bad about what's happening to black people, but the looting has to stop. We need to flip that around and say, that's really too bad about the looting, but the killing of black people has to stop.
Because if you solve one, the other one will go away.
Exactly.
People aren't going to be rioting and looting.
Well, and it's not
if things change, because the rioting arguably started when the three other police officers weren't charged
right away. Yeah,
and it was. I think they've just been charged today.
Correct.
It's been, as I said, as of recording this, I think it's been a couple days, just shy of over a week.
It's 8 days today.
Yeah, so it's
last
1 day
Tuesday.
Over a week, and it's now happening. And I've seen so many people say they'd rather not charge these people than stop the rioting and stuff, because that's arguably why it started happening. The protest is general for race and stuff, but the rioting and such, that was because nothing was happening with that.
And I think that's hard too, because again, stepping away from the heat of this topic, there are things behind the scenes that were transpiring. Like the reason that the lead officer, his charge was upgraded was because they got new information. Yeah. So it's not like nothing has happened. It's not happened fast enough. I think we all would have liked this taken care of within 48 hours. That would have been preferred. If it means an actual change, if the outcome is actually going to move the cause forward, hopefully people can look at this 8-day window and say, it was okay to not know what was happening. It's okay that it worked out. It's coming. I think the problem is that they've held their breath for so long waiting for that change and been disappointed every single time that at this point people are disenfranchised. Yeah. But I'm not going to sit there and judge anybody for being reactionary to the point of like physical aggression with like burning an inanimate object or taking their frustration out, when people have been told that, hey, you know what, Colin Kaepernick isn't really doing a good thing by kneeling. Passive protest has been discouraged. Yeah. So if you're, think about it, and I know we talked about this, the example I gave you. When you think about a small child, Think about the stages of a temper tantrum. The child will come to you and I want this, I want this. No, honey, you can't have that. Then the kid will get louder. Mom, I want this, I want this. And then maybe, they'll throw something on the ground, or they'll try and smack you, or, whatever, acting out. Then you have the full-on meltdown. This is how humans deal with not being heard. That's what it is. So again, there's been a lot of analyzing of self here, and to the point that I'm reading things that I've wanted to read and not made a point of doing. I've been borrowing books. I've ordered books. I'm following social media accounts that have been incredibly interesting. And I'm not going to sit here and list them all off or make recommendations. I think everybody has to do their own research. And that's what people have been saying to the white community for ages is, don't ask us to take care of this problem for you. You need to go and do your work. I'm here. I'm ready to do the work. I'm ready to find out, because we've got friends. A friend of mine that goes back to high school. And when I think back on some of the experiences that he went through, it hurts my heart. I actually have pain thinking of some of the stuff that he's been through. It's we can't understand what it's like, but we can do better as allies to support and come from an authentic place, not just ceremonial black screen, for Blackout Tuesday. No. That's not enough.
No.
That's one step, but that's not enough. And I think the more institutions and the more corporate and the more, like, literally from the ground up, the more we're being vocal about it, the better this is going to go. And it has to be consistent. We can't give up on this because there's a new crisis. Literally, this year could be a new crisis at the end of the frickin' week. But I have hope, and I'm hopeful for others. And I've reached out to friends who are people of color to check in on them and see if there's anything that can be done. And literally, I think for any of the people we're in connection with, it's just a wait and see situation, because for them it's every day, and they can't move forward until there's change, which
isn't coming fast enough.
It's not. It's long overdue. But so anyway, that's why I felt it was important. As you can see, we were both very passionate about this, and it was something we needed to kind of put out there, and we want to hear from you if this resonates with you. If you are a person of color and you feel that we've done you right, or if we've done you wrong, tell us. We want to make sure that we are doing better for you. And we would be happy to take into consideration any comments or thoughts or feedback you would have on this topic. And if we've misspoken, I want to apologize for anything that I may have said that may be not in the right context. It comes from the right place. Yeah. And I certainly would own anything that I'm saying that would be, a hurtful or not well placed thought or comment.
Misworded.
Yeah.
I apologize as well if I said anything like that. It's hard to find the words, especially when you're very upset about it. Like, I'm at the point right now where, like, my head's hurting just...
I know, I can tell you're frustrated.
Because I'm frustrated. And,
And we don't live with this.
No.
We don't. This has been a reality for us for 8 days. Yeah. Can you imagine
Every
8
day.
years, 80 years, people that have been told to be patient, and it's their grandkids that are getting killed now. So, like I say, we are... That's why we wanted to come at you with this episode. Mm-hmm. It's about being an ally, and we're looking at ways to explore that and be more demonstrative.
And as Mom said, do your own research at your own speed, especially right now, because there are other factors at play. You know, if you're on your own right now during COVID-19, and your mental health isn't good.
This could be too much to take on.
Too much to take on. So limit the amount you're taking in, but still try your best to take it in. And educate
because
yourself.
there's some people that don't have the option whether or not they take it in.
Of course.
It's their life. So
Yeah.
if we can do nothing more than identify with what their reality is, or sorry, I shouldn't identify, appreciate and see and witness what they're going through, I think is the most important thing. And just love each other for God's sake. Like it's foreign to us, and we live in a small town, and we don't have a lot of variation here, to be honest. As Corbin said, there's been a couple of pockets where they're, from different parts of the world that have come to, your school, people that have been students at your school. But
and that's why I said I'm lucky to have been my grade was very, very well cultured, and just generally compared to the other years and grades. So I'm very fortunate to have known and to be friends with them because, as you said at the start, I was one of those people who said, I don't see color, because literally that did not change a thing about anyone. And I still feel that way.
Yeah.
Not that I don't see color, but the fact that everyone is the same.
Yeah, there's no advantage.
But what I'm realizing now is that not everyone feels that way.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I think finding a way to communicate that to people who are resistant is going to be key. Because coming at someone hard, who's always held a certain position, screaming at someone who's a racist is not going to change their mind.
No.
It's finding a way to have that conversation and open their minds and open their hearts to what the reality is, and guide them from what was, which was always wrong, to what could be, which could be amazing. I think that's... We were commenting the other night about how it feels like right now the world is a snow globe, and it seems like everything needs to change at the same time. So whether it's, we need to deal with environmental issues because we see how much things improve with shutdowns, or, we need to unite as a planet because we need this solution for this pandemic, or most recently, humanity. Like, we've got to address this. We have to do better than this. And if you're doing better is you want to make a donation to an organization, and like Corbin says, if that's all you can do
it.
Is just make a donation because you can't handle the reading and you can't turn on the news because it's overwhelming, just do that.
Yeah, and if you can't financially, like, right now I'm saving up for school. I'm not in a position to be able to donate to bailing out protesters or the Black Lives Movement. So what I'm doing is I'm sharing the crap out of all of the injustices and
contents,
information and education on Black Lives Matter movement, and sharing that all over my Instagram, all over my Twitter, and sharing that, and also educating myself. So there are things you can do. There is at least one thing you can do. Do it.
Yes.
Because there is something that everyone can do.
And if you only do one thing, that's one thing more that's done.
Yes.
So we want to say thank you for listening. I know this has been a lot to listen to, and it's probably gone longer than we thought. We were afraid it would be like a 20-minute episode because we might be too upset to make it a full episode. And
we're not the most I'm certainly not the most cheery right now, but this is not the most
I don't think it has to be cheery. No. I don't think you can put a smiley face on this topic. And we'll try to go back to something a little more lighthearted, or maybe something a little more easier to enjoy.
And who knows? Next week we might do this again because, 5 more things happen. You never know.
We never know. But we want to leave that open to something that moves us this much that we feel compelled to talk about it.
Yeah. And one last thing before we head off, because I know we've kind of signaled to end the podcast a couple times. Because, as Mom said, we live in a small town. Not a lot of, police brutality and stuff like that happens in this town.
No.
However, I know so many people who, quote unquote, I'm using finger quotes right now, are like half and half racist. And what I mean by that is at my old high school or just around town, people aren't being full-on racist like what we see on the news.
Closeted racists. If you even make jokes about stuff, don't do that shit, okay? There's one more thing you can stop. You are just as bad as
full on racist. Even more so. That's my last message is, even if it's something little, if you know someone who does that, because I've spoken up and stood up to people, people I don't even know in a restaurant. I would go up to them and say, stop. Like, people I know, people in my family I've gone up to and said, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And the thing is that every time you do that, they realize that's not okay, and that's one step closer to them realizing what we've now realized, and that's one step closer to the desired goal. So I just want to leave that off with saying, even if it's a joke, finger quotes, even if you're joking with your friends, or you're just saying it to a friend, or you're just saying a word that you should not be saying because you have no right saying it, it's still the same thing, and you should just stop.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good spot to leave it. You guys know where to find us.
But we do want feedback. So let us know how you feel about this episode, and if you've got a story you want to share with us, we would love to hear it. And you can email that to us at chatspodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you're already streaming us, so you know where we're available on your favorite podcast apps.
Go back to another episode and listen, and at the end you can find out, because it doesn't feel right promoting.
I understand that.
During
I look at it
this
as communication for people to be able to connect with us. So we want to hear back from you. For sure, check out what we've been doing in previous episodes, and we want to hear from you, and look forward to hearing from you or connecting with you next week.
And if you are out there protesting, or say you're in another country protesting because people in New Zealand and
around the
England, around the world are protesting, be safe, because it is very dangerous, and know your rights before you go out.
Good advice.
Yes. So this has been me, Corbin.
And Sarah.
And Black Lives Matter, and we'll see you guys next week.